Okay, I hope everyone is now looking at a slide that says, New Year, New You, Mastering Change in 2025. So we'll be here for about an hour. If there are any questions, I'll be fielding them at the end. But welcome to our masterclass for today. So we'll start out with a little introduction about myself. So I want to let you know who I am and why I'm doing this. So I'm Jean Selkirk, and I coach people who want to start living their dreams. So how did I start living mine? When I was 25, I discovered that change was possible. And up until then, I hadn't been too sure about that. But I did discover that you could change the rules of the game and play a new one. 20 years went by, and then I discovered that not everyone had such an easy time with change and learning as I did. Why can't some people learn? So I really dug into this. And after about another 20 years of discovery, I found the answer. People fear change. And where did I find this? I discovered this in the Harvard research-backed book, Immunity to Change, and trainings I did with the originators of that process. And it also took becoming a coach and studying how trauma affects our brains to understand how to help people who can't change, who feel stuck, and like they're their own worst enemy instead of their best friend. So, oops, hang on, we got a little, here we go. So, why do we fear change? We make decisions under stress to feel safe. And because we're stressed, then we forget about them. And these decisions lead to actions and experiences that form our belief systems and actually prevent change. What this can sound like, if we listen closely, oh, I'm not good enough. No one will help me. Change is impossible, or I don't like it. I'd better hide. Or even when someone loves me, I'll be alone. We turn into victims or blame others or even get resentful or just put up with things. Even overcompensate and try to take care of everyone else when what we actually need to do is get furious about how our own needs were ignored. And then we think this is normal. But it's not the end of the story. Your story starts today as you learn the steps to move forward into the life you desire by navigating change and raising your EQ, or emotional intelligence. So I'm very happy you're here today and joined my class, masterclass on change and moving forward into your lives. It really shows that you care about your future and yourself. And while any time is a good time to start, but here, as of this recording, with a fresh year ahead, it really feels like anything is possible. There can be a new you in the new year. So our agenda for today, in a nutshell, is for you to see that if you know where you are in change, you can know where to go and how to get there. You might need to ask for help along the way to look at what's in the way of change, and that's okay. I've guided multiple people through this process over the years. Here's what one person related. I wanted to balance my family budget, but I couldn't stop myself from buying things. Jean coached me and worked with me through the immunity to change process. I discovered what I was trying to prevent by buying stuff I didn't even need. I never wanted to feel deprived again, as I did as a child. As we uncovered what I was afraid of, I could look at it and realize what I was doing and why. We designed a plan to try new behaviors, and finally, I believed I didn't need to be afraid. And I didn't need to buy stuff for myself and others to feel okay. So, as you may have guessed, we're here today to talk about change and your confidence, courage, and connection. What you can be and do when you become a change champion. We'll look at this in 3 sections. Mastering change, turning your fear of change into your greatest strength. Then the courage to connect, confidently build meaningful relationships. And last, using your EQ to navigate life's challenges with grace. So now you're looking at a bird's eye view of what I call your house of awareness or consciousness blueprint. This is just the first floor. And the reason I like to introduce this, besides the immunity to change, is that it really helps you get an overview of where you are and where you want to go. Now, this is just the first floor here. We can't see the basement or towers, but we can see the back porch and the gardens around the house. Then the front of the house is at the top. And before we go inside, we look at a mirror of our reality. We discover we can look at the world as either full of opportunity or obstacles. Because when we can see the world as full of opportunity, that's where we start feeling inspired. We want to make changes so what we desire can happen. Then we see a sign that reminds us to slow down before going inside. This means taking a moment to breathe, calm down, even meditate or do yoga. It's easier to know what's going on in our awareness when we don't rush in and when we don't rush into making changes. So once we get in the house, we're in what I call the change zone. Here's where we start checking things out. And some parts feel great. We can expand and feel like anything is possible. So over here, we have expansion and saying yes and belief. But other places can leave over here, can leave us feeling squished, contracted, and doubtful, even like we're shrinking. So over here, we're more into, no, I don't want to. But the reasons change can feel hard are located where we don't feel we can move. And also, it's not showing, but there's a basement to this house, which is my metaphor for where we stuff everything we really want to forget about. But again, that's where the magic happens. Just like in the story my client told, knowing this, looking at the very thing you fear, seeing how your own decisions about your experiences stop you is ultimately the answer to your successful change. And really, it's a lot like cleaning an actual house and deciding what stays and what goes. You can even redecorate. So taking the tour inside allows us to face our fear of change and get on with things. Once we have, we get to exit through our fear of change and move on to actually engaging in change. But It's not always a straight line to the finish. It might take more than one try. We might get hijacked by fears we haven't faced yet. Our brains can start feeding us old messages about failure. We call this autopilot. And stress can sidetrack us too. So, what do we do then? We look again in the mirror, realize that even in obstacles, there are opportunities. Slow down and go back into the change zone for answers. So once we make it out of the house and off the back porch through our fear of change, it's time to actually do something, to connect the inward focus to the outward action. We make choices, plan, and then take action and see that we can realize our dreams. And we look at the outcome. Do we like it? Do we need to make adjustments? Do we still feel contracted anywhere? It might indicate spending more time in the change zone. We look again in the mirror of reality and back into the house we go as needed. Continuous change is truly part of becoming a change champion. So now we'll take a look at the topics we're going to cover, from fear to freedom, the courage to connect, and emotional intelligence for lasting change. And here's what you'll discover. As we explore these three topics, you'll take home with you today how to navigate change, the value of preparation and prevention, how to deal with your fear of change, look inside for successful outward change, and how to change your beliefs by designing new experiences. So we will dive right into the first of the three sections, mastering change from fear to freedom, turning your fear of change into your greatest strength. We'll go through these four areas: the heart of change, the immunity to change, rewrite your beliefs, and building resilience together, one at a time. So, what is the heart of change? How does it affect your feelings and behaviors? Change is stressful because it does bring up our old fears and beliefs. The ones we've forgotten may be hovering just below the surface of our awareness, making us uneasy. As I mentioned, these can leave us feeling like losers instead of winners, angry instead of engaged, and fixing everyone's problems except our own. We might first need to find out what's making us feel unsafe, contracted. And if you don't have support, someone to listen to you, you might need to spend some time telling your story to yourself, all the facts and circumstances, how you feel about it. Write it out. And then, whether you believe it or not at first, tell yourself, it's perfectly understandable why I feel like this and why I can't change. Because that's the truth. We all have causes and conditions for why we do and don't do whatever we do. And everyone is always doing the best they can with the resources they have. Some of us just have fewer resources at times. When we don't feel safe, we make decisions that can prevent us from engaging in action and making changes later. First thing I do with every client is check out how safe they feel. Do they need to start doing practices to support feeling calm? Maybe even try some massage or energy work. Do they know how to slow down? And how comfortable are they looking into their own house of awareness? Because many people will do anything to avoid looking. So we're trying to find out how stressed out are they already before moving on. So next up is looking at the actual immunity to change process. So what are the Harvard research techniques that release you from being stuck? Given we may be feeling like this, stuck, contracted, not so willing to move forward, how do we deal with our resistance or immunity to change? First and foremost, whatever you want, it really has to matter to you. It needs to be stated positively and means making an important change inside, not just learning something new like a new app or software. So here's the question we ask. What do you want to get better at? So for example, at work, this might sound like, I want to get better at delegating. Or at home, I want my children to feel empowered to make decisions. So once you have clarity on the goal, then here comes the important part. You need to look at what are you doing or even not doing to try and get where you're intending to go. Or another way of saying it is, what are you trying or what are you avoiding? Once you have a list of those behaviors, then here's the tricky part. What do you imagine will happen if you do the opposite? And this very interesting little twist on things happens to open the door to our basement, to those places we're contracted, and lets us see what scares us. Because whatever we fear, we make up stories about it that drive our beliefs and behaviors. For example, if I do this, then that will happen, and that's going to be bad, so I just won't do it. So going back to our two examples, this would sound like, if I delegate work, they'll do it wrong and I'll look bad. Or if I let my children make decisions, they may be harmed. So we uncover what we're really scared of. And when we're afraid, we see obstacles, not opportunity. We contract and doubt and think we can't change. We might need to ask for help at this point from someone who believes in us to find ways to believe in ourselves. Now, the last step in the immunity to change is a process, and we'll continue that in the next section, which is rewriting your beliefs, methods to shift those limiting beliefs into positive mindsets. So the last step in the immunity to change process is to design new experiences. These build new beliefs about ourselves and what we can do. But we go slowly. And it's like an experiment. What's the opposite of what I think will happen? What if I give it a try? What happens if I try X instead of Y? And then we see what happens. If we don't succeed, then we might need a smaller experiment that works without adding to our stress. But as we move the bar on this, trying to reach our goal, we discover that trying what we fear, trying something kind of like it, maybe not exactly, but sort of, we find we really do have the courage to change. So how this might work out, using first an example of allowing your children to make your own decisions, you start on a gradient. For example, give them the opportunity to make a choice about something trivial. Or at work, delegate something not so critical. Then you can test out how it feels. Look over how you did it. Discover if the fear is manageable, and then up the ante on the next try. And we may also find we have some related challenges to work on. My client at first not only couldn't stop buying things, but bought everything related to what she wanted. She couldn't choose the one most important item. So she had to look at how she made decisions, which mostly turned out to be avoiding making decisions. As she continued to dig into the actual decisions she had made but had forgotten, she began to be able to live her life by choice without being driven by beliefs she didn't even know she had. All right, so we'll move into the last part of this first section about building resilience, learning the skills to manage change and thrive. When we're stuck in feeling like a victim or that what's going on in our lives is someone else's fault, the whole world seems like it's against us. But it's our feelings that make us see the world like that. They're like filters. In order to get to where we can see the world is full of opportunity and look at our filters instead of through them, we might need some help to take up some practices. Always, there is the skill of slowing down, but locating our sense of safety is important. But there's more we can do to improve our ability to change. Now, a big part of this bears repeating because it gives us the opportunity to feel okay about ourselves. As I described earlier, spending time either with support or on our own by listening to our stories and affirming we did the best we could at the time, that anyone in our circumstances would feel the way we did. We can see fewer obstacles and we reduce our experience of feeling contracted. And we can do other things to prevent feeling like we just don't have a choice. These practices help us see the world as it is and not how we want it to be, and also develop compassion for ourselves and other people. And most important, accept responsibility for our own lives. So first is what I call looking at our expectations of perfection. Because the instant we have an idea, we usually also have an idea of how it's going to look and feel. But this leaves no room for how things actually turn out. So here's the takeaway to consider. No one deserves to be blamed for failing to meet expectations of perfection, including ourselves. The second aspect of prevention is looking at our opinions of ourselves and what's around us. Most of the time, when we have an opinion about someone or something, it's actually how we would feel if we were doing what they are doing, because something seems to be wrong to us. But here's the thing, we are not them. Usually the other person is doing what they're doing because it's what they want to do. And we most often don't have to do what they're doing, so why get upset about it? When we can just let other people live their lives, we have more energy for living our own. But there's another layer to this. The amount of negativity we express about what's going on outside of ourselves is directly related to how wrong we feel on the inside. And the truth is that we're all inherently good. But some of us have hearts that are very, very hurt and cause us to think thoughts and do deeds that cause harm. We've looked at the way change can affect us, the techniques to use to move us forward and change our beliefs, and how to get even better at change by increasing our resilience. Now we'll move on to the next section on connection. And what we cover in this section, the courage to connect by building meaningful relationships, allows us to find the confidence to form deep and lasting connections. Now, I hope you can start to understand that knowing how change works, how knowing where we are in change lets us figure out where to go, what to do next, and also how taking care of what prevents change, like expectations and opinions, can allow us to feel better about ourselves and also other people. We are here to connect with people, but we can instead end up feeling lonely and separate. So we're going to look at this in 3 ways. Understand your need for connection. Explore what drives your desire for relating meaningfully. Build trust and vulnerability. How to open up and trust yourself and others. Communicate authentically. Increase your ability to express yourself. And overcome social fears, techniques to reduce anxiety and build confidence in social settings. All right, so we'll dive right into understanding your need for connection. Now, the more time you spend in your house of awareness, doing the housekeeping, clearing out the basement, the more comfortable you will feel being you. You'll experience expansion, want to say yes, and can actually enjoy hanging out with yourself without distractions. This is what it means to feel connected to yourself. Literally, you are making more room for yourself. And the funny thing is that when you have room in your house of awareness for you, then there's actually more room for other people too. You can feel more connected to others. And this lays the ground for the next point. Building trust and vulnerability, how to open up and trust yourself and others. Once we truly dive into making changes and pay attention to what's in the way of change, what's also in the way of feeling safe, that starts the whole process of clearing out the basement and creating that space we're looking for to feel expansion. And once you have that room, you no longer have the beliefs based on ideas like, oh, other people are here to harm you or take advantage of you or just simply make you feel bad. Guess what happens? There's nothing to hide. There's nothing driving you in ways you don't really want to go because you are squarely in the driver's seat at the controls. Now, it doesn't happen overnight, but keeping your eye on the prize does help keep you going. So our next topic is communicating authentically. So clearing out our house of awareness, making room inside that allows us to make those changes outside, connecting with ourselves, this absolutely drives authenticity because it allows us to be spontaneous and engage with people in a way both we and they can trust. And by then, usually, instead of feeling embarrassed about our life or ashamed, instead of wanting to hide, we can feel proud of what we do or have survived. With nothing to hide, we can be open, and other people feel like we can listen to them. I compare this to literally having clean windows on a house. When we've mastered change and start actively cleaning our house of awareness, people can see in those windows and we can see out. We can receive information and feelings others want to share and can feel comfortable sending out what we're experiencing without fear. So moving on to our last topic in this connection section, overcoming social fears, the techniques to reduce anxiety and build confidence in social settings. So maybe we've started changing. We've really dug into this, and we're wanting to have our dreams and be a different person. Sometimes we can still be a bit nervous about how change is affecting us. After all, what will people think if we suddenly start expressing ourselves more openly, sharing our feelings, even taking a stand? This can be a process. Everyone will feel more or less comfortable being more open, depending on how clean the windows are in other people's house of awareness. I usually find it's a testing process. I try a little more openness and see how that goes. Was my expression received with openness, or did something go bump, like someone closing their shutters? Or were they starting to express opinions and telling me how wrong things are? Or even worse, getting angry? These are definitely signals to back off and close your own windows until you're in a safe space. Personally, after years of almost having a panic attack when I had to speak in front of a large group or even be in one, now I just feel a little flutter and I can breathe through it. But there are practices you can try to support feeling calm until your sense of safety is really secure. Sort of as a general groupings, they're breathing, grounding, feeling like you're really connected to the earth, and boundaries. There are more extended practices in my online course, which you'll hear about at the end. So in summary, the more we can deal with our fears, the more we can feel safe in connecting with ourselves and others. And there is another aspect to this we'll cover as we look at EQ in the next section. So moving along into our last section, EQ, we will dive right into emotional intelligence for lasting change. What are the pillars of emotional intelligence, and how does it impact your well-being? I like to approach EQ, or knowing how to recognize, understand, and manage our own feelings and others' feelings, from two directions. First, from the standpoint of how mindful our brain can be. You can read all about mindful brains in the book, The Mindful Brain by Daniel Siegel, MD. I'll be talking more about it here as we go through EQ. And secondly, can we express ourselves without harming others? In other words, communicate nonviolently. And this draws from Marshall Rosensberg's book on nonviolent communication. Now, if you have already been paying attention to what's involved in change, trying it yourself, and starting to experience the benefits of authentically expressing yourself, you're well on your way to being responsible for how you express yourself, and to do so in a way that doesn't cause harm. Now, even though there are 9 levels to a fully mindful brain, there are really just several key points to keep in mind. And this is the main one. Safety is the foundation for the very pinnacle of mindfulness, which is being ethical. If we don't feel safe, we might be able to have a partly mindful brain, but not feeling safe dysregulates us emotionally. We feel anything except for calm. Instead, we feel nervous, anxious, angry, outraged. Stress chemicals flood our system. We might not even be able to find the words to tell anyone how we feel, or engage in outbursts saying things we later regret and that make other people not feel safe. And if we don't experience feeling safe, we cannot truly act in ways that show we care about not harming others, show that integrity and ethics matter to us. And definitely, we cannot empathize with others. If we often do not feel safe, we may need to improve our EQ. The first step, and this will sound familiar, is learning how to become calm, finding that sense of safety. This may take seeking support or taking up practices I mentioned earlier that can help with slowing down and finding calm. And then we can tackle the next levels, which we'll get into as we move along. So the next area is managing emotions, learning how to better understand and regulate your feelings. Now, what might this look like? Apart from doing our housekeeping in our house of awareness, so we can communicate our feelings clearly and cleanly, several key elements may need attention in successfully managing our feelings. We want to be able to both regulate our feelings and be flexible with them. Then we can be responsive to our surroundings and other people, and probably be kinder as well. Often the practice of meditation can be a big help with this, as well as in slowing down. Because when you can slow down, you also usually develop the capacity to not blurt out the first thing that comes into your head. And you can also discover, once your internal experience is no longer on overdrive, that you can catch a feeling before it becomes full blown and be a choice over whether you want to experience that feeling or release it. One practice that supports flexibility in our feelings is taking a moment to inquire. If we can ask about what's going on inside of ourselves or others, instead of assuming we know, this not only helps with staying at choice, but with what comes next. Another aspect of prevention is something that comes up when we engage with change. Our autopilot can kick in when we're under stress. That stream of thoughts in our heads that comes from we're not too sure, but it seems really worried. But it comes down to who's running the show. Outdated messages about how we'll fail or us. So the task is to figure out about disengaging our autopilot when it kicks on, and instead being able to focus on what is positive and true. When we get better at slowing down, we can often catch this and return to feeling expansive and open before autopilot gets into high gear. So these are the basic internal housekeeping elements of emotional intelligence. But to really become a master at EQ, we also need to give and receive emotions with others. So this gets into building empathy. Enhance how you relate by increasing your understanding of others. Now, in the levels of a mindful brain, a level right before empathy at the midpoint is also the pivot point. The ability to notice what others are feeling and the ability to let them know that you do know, to reflect their feelings back to them by way of expression or words. And this is called attunement. Now, attunement and empathy can be difficult for anyone who has not themselves received attunement. And it's probably the most important thing any parent can do for their child because it educates children about their own emotional states and what to call them. So, as grown-ups, sometimes we need to attune to ourselves to figure out what's going on, or have another adult offer us attunement. Attunement is different from empathy, which is where you are making your best guess about what someone else is feeling, trying to imagine putting yourself in their shoes. Now, an interesting note on this: Brene Brown, author of Atlas of the Heart, tells us that maybe this is actually impossible, that perhaps at best we can try to believe how others feel when they tell us. But the effort to understand is what matters. And asking is so important. When something happens, difficult or great, try saying, "How was that for you?" You might be surprised at what you hear. So, moving into our last topic for today, real world EQ applications, understanding how emotional intelligence leads to personal and professional development. So, if you have tackled a change process, done the internal explorations to locate your own fears and blocks, started to clear out the basement, you are already a long ways along toward raising your EQ and being able to see opportunity. Once you can experience feeling open and authentic with others, you're likely also able to successfully attune and empathize. If we had a healthy upbringing, we may well have had a great deal of natural ability with emotional intelligence. But often not being able to function well from the standpoint of EQ can mean we missed one important step or another when developing into a grown up. We can always go back and take care of that. But there are still more levels to developing a mindful brain that can be key to living your life fully at work and at home. What's interesting about them is that these next two, insight and intuition, often come online once you start removing the barriers to connecting to yourself. Each of these plays a key role in navigating life. Insight gives us the ability to fully use our house of awareness to navigate our lives. When we know our own strengths and shortcomings, can look ourselves squarely in the eye and reflect on any situation we find ourselves in and come up with answers about what to do. We're then acting with the full authority of who we know ourselves to be. We might still worry and feel contracted at times, but because of that self-knowledge, we can return to being confident and effective in whatever we try. Insight and intuition go hand in hand in maximizing our personal and professional development. While insight is being able to access the information, we may need to make a decision. Intuition is that internal sense of knowing what is the right decision for us. And once we're confident making decisions that concern us, we can often extend our intuition into leadership of others. And then the pinnacle of a mindful brain, what allows us to trust ourselves and other people to trust us, is our integrity, our sense of what's ethical, what is the correct thing to do for the most number of people given the circumstances. Trust is a huge part of leadership, which is integral to being a professional or a parent. And part of how we earn it is in knowing how to be around people without causing them harm and knowing what we say and do affects them. By building our EQ through the process of learning how to change, connecting with ourselves, and dealing with whatever makes us see obstacles, we can also find ourselves well along the way to developing a mindful brain that also sees opportunity. Along the way, as our sense of safety grows As our ability to choose and change develops, we can hold space for ourselves and others. Truly, through learning to finish growing up, to fully develop our EQ, we can also find ourselves waking up. So, in conclusion, I hope your takeaway from your experience today includes the following. If you truly learn to navigate change by slowing down, using preparation and prevention, your ability to see opportunity grows as you see fewer and fewer obstacles. Fear of change can be overcome. Go inside to change on the outside. And lastly, whatever you believe, you can make changes in what you believe through taking on new experiences. So, over and over, guiding clients through these steps, I see people really bloom as they come into their full potential. And that's with nothing other than coaching that trains people in how change works, just as you've heard about today. I've seen people turn into valued managers, and I've seen people who are therapists and haven't dealt with their own trauma learn how to start healing. If you want to experience the benefits of being a change champion, I have two paths you can explore. For personal guidance through coaching, you can schedule a chemistry call to explore options. Or if you want a deeper experience of what I covered today, check out my online course, Ever Present Change, featuring the Your House of Awareness Blueprint. And I will put these in the chat. You can access both of them through my website. And we are just about done sharing the screen here. I just want to grab these couple of things. And so thank you very much for being here with me today.